And now I would like to show you several photos. This is the show.
Wonderful.
People kept asking me, oh my God, is this a Hasselblad? They always asked me about the Hasselblad, the camera. And yes. I was wondering, why are people are so obsessed with tech in the Valley? Was this always the case?
I guess that's what the flower children were not, but the scientist flower children were always.
When did you come to Silicon Valley?
In 1983.
And how did that happen?
Before that time period, the high-tech industry was on the East Coast. So my first job after my master's degree in international business was with IBM, which was then the most powerful tech company in the world. And I worked with their World Trade Group. Everything was on the East Coast. And the next innovator was a company called Xerox, which developed this photocopying technology. And they'd offered it to IBM, and IBM didn't see the significance of it, so passed on it. And then Xerox became the most profitable, successful company. And for them to scale, they hired people from IBM. So I ended up at Xerox. And then Xerox was making so much money just giving people the opportunity to make copies of documents. And they never sold the equipment at the time. They just rented it. So it was the money printing machine of a company. And so they had all this extra money that they decided to set up a research center in the midst of all the hippie land of California. And the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center was created, and it was the best place for scientists to work with a lot of resources, etc. So they attracted incredible talent, and they asked them to imagine a paperless future, which seemed kind of funny. And they, of course, didn't want that to happen. They made the money on printing. And surprise, surprise, that's where this current digital world we live in today was conceived, and the core technologies were developed. So I got shipped there to figure out how to commercialize these technologies and whether there was any potential of doing that. And so that brought me from the East Coast to here, and it was the dead of winter. So it was blizzards and snow and terrible on the East Coast. And here it was green and flowers, and I love tennis. The tennis courts were abundant. And so I moved here and to this area. How I picked this area was interesting too, because it was bicycle distance to the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center. And the whole lifestyle here was completely relaxed and outdoors. So I got to work with these great scientists, and I am not a scientist. I'm a person who helps make technology relevant for normal people. So that's how I ended up here, end of 83. So at that point of time, the tech center of the world was on the East Coast of the United States, between New York and the Boston area. And then, as we know, in time, it all shifted to here.
And did you expect this to happen so quickly?
No, not at all. In truthful confession here, I was just happy to be here because of the weather and the cool people. I donated all my suits and clothes to the Goodwill, left them all behind, my snow boots and everything. So I was just happy to be in nice weather with all long-haired people like me at the time in t-shirts, but who were brilliant. So that was the attraction, and one never knew how important this would become in every aspect. Later at Apple, we used to have one closet where we kept jackets and ties. And people just would pull the jacket, and if somebody was coming from Europe or from Japan, and we had this delegation come from Japan, we'd all sent notices, go get a jacket and get a tie if you can, whatever. And so we all were dressed up, and all the Japanese executives came in polo shirts, just happy to be here. So jackets came off in a hurry.
Counterculture. So I was wondering, were you a hippie too?
Yeah, actually, I have a very unusual background. I grew up in India in a military boarding school. From age 5.5 to 17, I was in uniform. It was patterned after the British Military Academy of Sandhurst and the public schools they call Eton and Harrow. And my graduating degree was from University of Cambridge. And then I went to the Punjab University, which was a gorgeous campus designed by Corbusier, Le Corbusier. So extraordinary. But India was, those days, was a very popular visiting spot for hippies. And so we would have the old Volkswagen buses coming in with hippies, and we guys, while our country kept getting more and more socialistic and Western things were not allowed to be imported, etc., we used to trade cassette tapes with the hippies. So I remember getting my cassette tapes, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. So I started just enjoying the hippie culture and the music and things. And then from my schooling background, people would either join the armed forces or, as now popular, people would go into engineering schools and or medicine. I was always interested in things more international and more global culture. I'll regress. My father was in the Indian Olympic contingent to the Berlin Olympics in 1936. Okay. And he was an avid photographer and a traveler. They played exhibition matches all over Europe. So he had a fantastic album of everywhere, very nicely documented. So pre-war Europe, amazing. So I always blamed our dad for giving me the wanderlust. So that was the attraction. And those days, people of my background in India would prefer to study at Oxford or Cambridge. I preferred the US and the West Coast and the new culture.
Why were you interested in the new culture?
It's usually music is a great influence in people's mind. And even though I come from a heritage of military and all that stuff, I thought the make love, not war was a better mission to have.
And were you interested in literature?
I would say not particularly, other than as you saw Bob Dylan get a Nobel Prize for literature, right? So the literature was in the music. My prior education was more English literature, though I did study German in school in India.
Oh, okay.
I studied French when I came to the United States.
On the left side, you see the Chandelier of Timothy Leary.
Oh, very cool.
Do you think the drug culture at that time, like the psychedelics, had a big influence on the tech people, or didn't it have any influence?
I don't know. It didn't have on me. and none of the people at Xerox PARC that I knew were heavy into drugs and things. One of my colleagues and teammates, Joe Becker, created the Unicode standard. It's the basis of all foreign language computing. Without that, we wouldn't be easily doing German or my mother tongue of Punjabi. And Joe had a passion for languages and mastered almost over 20 languages, and the rest of the team. So people had very unusual passions, interests, and they had beautiful minds. So all today, the tools you use, Adobe and things, all these people, Chuck Geschke, John Warnock, they're neighbors of mine. The man who taught Steve Jobs design, Hartmut Esslinger, is German from Bavaria. He's also lives close by and is a good friend. So all these folks, the guy Metcalf who created all the bandwidth, the networking, they all were long-haired, free-thinking people, but they were brilliant. So they weren't drugged out and off the yeah. So they were definitely high, but at a different level. That's how they could create this. Another colleague and friend who just passed away, Larry Tesler, he was the guy who came up with the cut and paste. Yeah. And he became the chief technology officer. Steve Jobs hired him from Xerox PARC. So everybody was high on some other aspect, and then they went and delivered on it. But none of them that I knew were avaricious or greedy. Their cause was paramount. But they were not conventional people by any means, nor did they like, bureaucracies and things. Yes, this was my first place. Yeah. The offices had bean bags.
Back then?
Yeah. Okay. Compared to the Burlwood walls in the East Coast, it is an entirely different area. Yeah.
So they already had bean bags then when you started back in the 70s or 80s?
Yeah, that's how the whole lifestyle was that way.
So funny, because now it feels like in the startups, the beanbag has become some kind of cliche.
Yeah, no, now you see, now it's, and everywhere one sees, it's imitation. It's not originally inspired. So people are creating the look, but today there's a lot of new culture, which I don't like. You have the appearance of cool and this, that, and the other, and inside you're full of greed. So it's a different, I call it the invasion of Wall Street into, the Wall Street wolves have penetrated and affected the culture of Silicon Valley, not in a nice way.
Do you have any idea why?
No, because you see, everybody, again, during my after college years, etc., it was Wall Street where you went to go make money. So all the wealth and the making money machinery was driven out of that mindset, and or you became bankers or you became consultants, the McKinseys and all, and that was the fastest. Everything was about the fastest way to the top. The consulting firms gave you that opportunity to go and rise above, and the banking and those institutions, how to make And the guys here were how to change the world, make the world a better place. So it was a complete mind opposite. But then people here started making so much money, and the guys there got all envious that how the heck are these guys making money? I want to be there. So they followed the money. Yeah.
Okay, I understand. So back then, the idea of making the world a better place.
Yes.
So if people say this now, you would say it's also an imitation of what it was back then, because back then
now,
it was...
now there's a lot of people who say it, but the motivation is not at that level. And there are enough people trying to make things better. While there's now there are too many people trying to commercialize everything, try to make money off everything kind of stuff. That's been in a shift, and people want the faster returns. Those people slogged for decades before things happened. And also the venture capitalists then were real pioneers. They wanted to help people become successful. Okay. And they put in all their experience behind it. And it was, if business became successful, they became, but they not only put their money, they put every effort in there. Unlike traditional banks and financiers who want to lock in your assets and charge you an interest, and then they take your asset if you don't deliver. So it is a complete different financial mindset as well.
So let's see this. You know what this is? Yeah, right?
Yeah, I absolutely know what this is.
Have you been there?
Yeah, of course, yes.
Like for a coffee or a cake or just?
No, just showing people.
Oh, okay.
People are curious. Yeah, this is Hartmut Esslinger's design of the Mac. Yes, this is where all the design studios and all were on Bradley Street.
Did you work there?
No, I was in a different office, but we were in and out of there. There was a building called the International Building. I was part of the International Group.
These windows looked a bit like monitors, right?
Okay, no, I think that was probably accidental.
And I went there because I read an article that before there was a kind of peach farm or something.
Yeah.
And
all these were orchards, this whole area.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And I thought these windows were so interesting because they are like mirrors, right?
Yeah, yeah. During my time, everything was, this is, when did you take these photos?
In 2018.
Yeah. See, now everything at Apple is very locked down. Yeah. And it's very secure. Yeah. It's probably more secure than the US government. But those days, everything was very open door and accessible and things going in. Later, it became, stakes got higher. Now, Apple's a very locked down place.
Is that strange for you to see that now?
Yeah, it's a different culture now. Now it's a very strict, austere culture. During the early days, it was a very open culture.
This photo I took on University Avenue in Palo Alto, and someone must have bought the Apple laptop and just took it out and just put the box into the bin.
Oh, what a shame. Yeah, actually even the boxes packaging as are art pieces. But interestingly, Apple learned all of this in Japan. I was with Apple in Japan. Quality levels were so high in Japan. If a shrink wrap had a crease on it, the box was returned. So we had to learn to reach that Japanese level of quality. And that's what led to, now Apple's teaching the world quality. Yeah, no, it's art all the way. And I think Johnny Ive gets also a lot of credit for this perfection in design and art.
So these are my last phones, the last 5 years.
Interesting. So you must be very young. You didn't have the old Palm Pilot. I was the chief marketing officer of Palm during the time we took it public, and it used to be considered a geek's toy, not for mainstream. And I remember creating a video that showed, we called it The Perfect Day, that it was more of going to be a lifestyle product for everyone. That was the product that would bridge the digital divide. And it used to be Steve Jobs' favorite product, was the Palm Pilot. His whole iPhone is actually the betterment of the Palm Trio, which was the first truly usable smartphone. And when Palm decided to integrate tightly with Microsoft, that's when he got upset and decided to do the iPhone. So he just bettered the Palm. And but the Palm was the first. In fact, those days, I had the opportunity, Claudia Schiffer reached out to me. She thought it was the most useful product. And she had one made to her specifications and things. Anyway, the Nokia is interesting for me to look at, because at Palm, we were unable to scale to the demand. So we used to suggest to Nokia that they partner with us. And they had the global distribution and manufacturing, all the things we didn't have, but we had the secret sauce, but they refused to partner or collaborate with us. And Europe was ahead because Europeans were doing text messaging before the Americans knew what it was. Yeah, but the Palm was the first mobile product that had easy to use applications that could be used as a phone. Yeah, and things. And but we didn't have the ability to scale. We were a little startup at the time. And so that those stories repeat. IBM refused Xerox. Xerox refused to commercialize its own products, which Apple did. So always somebody new can disrupt anybody, no matter how large. There was a company called MySpace, which preceded Facebook. There was a company called InfoSeek, which preceded Google. So there's always opportunity for somebody to come and redefine things.
But I mean, if Nokia and Palm would have partnered, that would have really changed things, right?
Yeah, there would have been no iPhone. Yeah, it should have. Apple's whole fortune, new fortune, because even though the Apple Macintosh computers were superior to use than anything else, they didn't have the broad connectivity with business and things. The iPhone is what connected everybody, and the current power of Apple comes from the iPhone. Nokia literally had it in the palm of their hands. You get rich and successful, you get arrogant, and then you can think your own money can make you do anything until my crowded office. Yes.
And I chose this photo because of the tech, of course, right?
Yes, 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 yes. Oh, very untidy. First on the left is the first computer that have a TV tuner in it. the Mac TV, and the other one, the Bang & Olufsen look one, was designed by Johnny Ive, and Bob Bruner used to be the design head at Apple, and he designed the Beats headsets later on. And so, but this was Johnny's, and I remember showing it to Steve Jobs, saying, this Johnny Ive is a very gifted man. So this was the first. It was a music computer, a music system, and a television all integrated in one with a flat screen. So this is like 25 years ago, way ahead of its time. You know, the poster, the Homeland Security, the magazine on top of that is a German magazine called 12. And on the left is an old BMW motorcycle, which my father owned one like that. So I'm connecting your little German memories out there.
That's nice. And did these products sell well, the Apple products?
No, they were way ahead of the time, and they were limited editions. These were like, you know, concept cars. You create them to create interest. Those are the first one on the left, the black one. People at that time were still not open to the idea, accepting it fully, that you could watch moving images on a computer screen. And it had a built-in CD-ROM. People, you know, even at Apple, there was pushback saying we should be making computers that compute faster, not show video. So these were cutting edge at that time, again, to trigger the imagination of people.
And it's interesting because now lots of people just watch television and films on their laptops, right?
Yeah, completely. And that's how the whole Beats headsets were conceived when Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre realized most music is being listened through digitally now, through computers and things. So we have to make the audio experience better. This is Regis Mckenna. He's the man who taught Steve Jobs marketing. And he was also the person who came up with the Intel Inside idea for Intel. So Regis not only taught Steve and Apple marketing and communications, the whole Silicon Valley method of marketing and communications he's the father of all of that. And I am delighted and fortunate to have him as a mentor and friend. He's still alive and still very active.
What are the most important things you learned from him?
The relationship. People just want to sell you stuff in your face. And he defined the whole process of building relationships right through all the avenues of your communication and interaction with people. Apple, in a way, is a relationship brand. People love the Apple. They don't walk away from the relationship. Yeah. Others, it's just the product, then you buy the next thing. People who are in the Apple sort of ecosphere, it's hard to break. You're in there. And that's how now the whole startup team, marketing team of Google used to be in my group at Apple. So that whole method of communication building, loyalty with your customers, the developers, all the people who add value, that whole method was what one learned from him. And it was the same sort of when I was in Japan with Apple, that we applied that same way of thinking there, and it proved very successful. We became the coolest brand in Japan.
And you worked for Apple in which period of time?
I was there from 1988 to 1997. It was a 10-year period.
Okay. What were the most important experiences you had during that time, or the most important things you created?
During my time, then Steve's successor, John Scully, he realized or came to the conclusion that the computer industry could be taken over by Japan Inc. Prior to the 80s, every industry, 70s and 80s, every industry the Japanese targeted, they took. They learned all the camera, Canon and all, they bought the German brands, the Leicas and things. They learned from the Germans, and then they perfected things. They learned from Professor Deming quality. Every industry, whether it was white goods, whether it was even Xerox's photocopiers, autos, motorcycles, every industry they targeted, they conquered. We used to call them Japan Inc. It was the most powerful economic nation in the world. Its economy was second to the United States. And the new emerging industry was the computer industry. And the Japanese started buying the US semiconductor businesses. That is when John Scully realized if we do not succeed against the Japanese, they'll own the computer industry. So he set up a new group in Apple called Apple Pacific. We were going to focus across the Pacific Ocean. Typically, it was just over the international. And he felt that we must make a beachhead in Japan. So I was selected to be the team and the marketing leader for that effort. And I was hired from Xerox. When we first went there, if they saw an Apple box, they put it in a refrigerated truck. We had zero brand recognition in Japan, but we then decided to create products that would add value to the Japanese language and culture and things. And we ended up going from less than 50 million revenue to over $1 billion in 3 years. So we became the biggest success story. And we managed to win in the next industry. And we established our whole digital strategy, et cetera, from Japan. So that helped us with a whole new frontier and gave the foundation, which again, then Steve Jobs and Tim Cook capitalized and built on later. So that was very, very, very critical. So the whole Japan adventure, then I was selected to found the team that created what we call digital and interactive media today. So at the time it was called, I was the general manager and vice president of a group called New Media for New Markets. That's when we established then relationships with the music industry, with Hollywood, with all the creative people, and changed the computing paradigm. And the next phase of that was then the connectivity and the bandwidth. So I was involved with several phases of these. And the last was again then at Palm, when we had everything. First thing was taking everything digital, and next thing, everything digital, taking it mobile. So I was very fortunate to be in roles during these critical new waves of driving adoption. And now it's part of everybody's life. In the early 90s, only 10% of people had home computers.
Do you think the design is a very important part of that?
Oh, absolutely, completely integral part of that. And that's again what Hartmut, if you see the first Apple computer that Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs created, it was just a clunker of a keyboard and things. Hartmut deserves the credit to influence and coach Steve and give him that design. Then Steve and Johnny Ive took it to yet another level. So design is part of the overall experience, and people don't give it, it's the form and function debate goes on forever. And it's yet the balancing and delivering that user experience is what's crucial for everything.
And was Steve himself interested in design, or did he only understood this because he met Hartmut Esslinger?
No, the thing is, Steve's biggest attribute was he was a very curious person. And he would get into things completely. He felt it. Yeah. It's in the India, there's a saying we translate, it's between, in the Indian language, it's called Guru and Chela. Guru is the teacher and Chela is the student or the intern. And at some point, the intern becomes the Guru, etc. So Steve was very particular in typography. I remember meeting Paul Rand, one of the great designers who designed the IBM logo and the next logo for Steve Jobs. And Paul Rand was telling me how particular Steve was. Yeah, if you see the Apple typography, the white space, everything, things can become a hodgepodge in a flash. Everybody wants to add their little tweak to it. So the whole Apple style is so consistent and beautiful, and it's now being copied and emulated everywhere. And if he hadn't been that particular and forceful about it, it would be a hodgepodge like everything does become.
It's interesting because when I did one of my other interviews, I suddenly realized, and this is interesting that you focus on the design part now, from the hippie era, the whole culture of aesthetics and everything was so different from what Apple built.
But the original Apple logo was very hippie, and the whole logo and colors with the rainbow colors and even the name Apple, all of it was very hippie, I'd say. Yeah. So now it's become all sleek, but it came from that place. Also, I should credit Sony, because Sony was a design pioneer in miniaturization, and Steve was a great fan of Sony's. So every component in an Apple computer, almost every component came from Sony. When we led this whole digital media wave, even in this product you see on your screen right now, the CD-ROMs were all from Sony. So Sony was a huge influence on Steve and Apple. And it's interesting that today everybody takes the lead from Apple, including Sony.
Do you still have time, actually?
I have another 6 minutes.
If you only have 6 minutes, then we start here. I took a lot of photos of people walking to work in Palo Alto. One morning, I realized that there were groups of people regularly in Palo Alto doing these kind of strange games, team building games.
Yes.
Would you have ever done that back at Apple in the 80s?
Oh, that's how it all started, team building. See, now things have become sort of almost formalized. We used to have crazy team buildings. We used to go mountain climbing. We'd go river rafting. A lot of, it was very much part of that whole culture to build that team spirit and inspiration. And teams even went up to Mount Kilimanjaro up in Africa. And Yeah, so it was very much a unique sort of Apple culture that then when Apple people and all go elsewhere, they start applying that. So, but now things have become almost a formula where we would be learning cooking, we'd be doing all kinds of stuff. And every Friday, we used to have something called beer busts. So that's with pizzas and chicken and whatever. And that's when everybody mingled around and talked to each other, and you learned many things because the marketing guy would run into a tech guy, a guy from advanced technology. So that's when we interacted outside of ours. You know, every organization, when it goes about 25, 50 people, ends up in silos. People are in their own little groups. They all keep within one side, doesn't talk to the other. So these beer busts and interaction opportunities is when you communicated and learned things other people were doing, etc., and you built friendships across the company.
I have one last question. I read on your Wikipedia actually in April 2018, and this is when we met, right? Speaking at the inaugural edition of If So What, this is where we met. Chahil referred to Silicon Valley as the modern equivalent to Florence during the Renaissance.
Yes. We were talking earlier. So one day it kind of dawns on me, oh my God, this area has become the sort of the epicenter of the tech industry. And then when these Genentech and all started, these biotech companies started surfacing, I went, oh my God, this thing's becoming the epicenter of the whole biotech pharma industry. Then it just goes in, then the whole telecom thing. And then the last, I was in India, where I have my foundation in the hinterland, you know, where electricity is scarce. There's folk songs that were referring to getting a like on a Facebook. And I went, oh my God, Silicon Valley now is the epicenter of culture, world culture. They're affecting a village in India of how people are thinking and reacting. So that is frightening, you know, but the impact is so huge. And similarly, the way Florence, but I've revised by thinking in the last 2 years, I always felt Florence was the whole beginning of Renaissance and this way, a new way for the world. But actually preceded by Florence was Venice. Even Da Vinci went to Venice, you know, so actually Venice is the place to be celebrated, I believe, because it is where, again, where the meeting place of East and West, and the truly so many aspects about it could be very inspiring for everything again today. So, so that's where I was in 2018.
Okay, so now you're in Venice from Florence.
Now I'm in Venice.
Okay, I see. What would you wish for Silicon Valley?
I wish it would get back to its original purity of thought and action, and less about the money and dominance and things.
You think people who work there now, the young people, wish for that too? Do you think?
No, I think they need to. They need to. And there needs to be an awakening. This whole nobody realized or expected how destructive all the social media and a lot of the new technology enablers would be to society and humanity. So there needs to be a real, a sort of serious introspection of doing things that are right rather than chasing money and manipulation and things. I'm sure have you seen the movie, The Social Dilemma?
Yeah.
I think they did a very good job in highlighting how things are and where. So I'm hoping there would be a proper introspection and awakening and getting back to what it was originally about.
That's a very nice wish for the future. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
Likewise. Take care. Keep well.
Take care.
Hopefully we can all travel again soon.